the first footsteps, the villagers swore they had seen it move. At first, the tale seemed too absurd to Belavan. Old weathered house, its timbers cracked and its roof sagging, slowly lifting itself from the ground and stepping forward, as though it had legs buried beneath the soil. Children whispered the story in the market square, giggling nervously. Elders shook their heads but avoided speaking of it after nightfall, as if the very mention of the walking house might summon its shadow across the fields. It was said the house had no fixed address. By morning it could be perched on a cliffside, gazing over the restless sea. By evening it might appear in the heart of a desert, its windows glowing with lantern light against endless dunes. No one knew where it came from or where it was going. Only this much was certain. The house walked, and that was enough to unsettle even the bravest souls. Far away from those whispered markets and fearful villages, a young traveler named Elias dreamed of the horizon. He was not yet 20, with restless eyes that carried the hunger of someone who believed the world still held secrets meant only for him to find. His boots were worn, his satchel patched with clumsy stitches, but his spirit burned with the fierce flame of curiosity. For months, Elias had followed scattered rumor stories passed between merchants, sailors, and wandering bards. Each spoke of a house that moved with the patience of the mountains, striding slowly across the earth. Some claimed it was cursed, forever searching for a resting place it would never find. Others believed it was blessed, a guardian built by forgotten hands to watch over the world. A few whispered it contained treasures from every land it had, visited scrolls of lost knowledge, relics of vanished civilizations, maps that stretched beyond the edges of any chart. Elias, like many before him, did not know which tale to trust. But unlike them, he chose not to remain in doubt. He would find the house. He would see it with his own eyes. One mist-heavy dawn, Elias set out alone from a small port town. The sea fog curled around him like ancient breath, muffling the creak of ropes and the flap of sails behind him. He walked inland, guided only by the faint suggestion of a path winding into the hills. The air grew quieter the farther he went. Birds hushed their morning calls. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Elias paused, feeling a weight in the silence. Then, faint and distant, he heard it. A sound like thunder but slower, heavier, deliberate. Boom, pause, boom, pause. It was not the sky. It was not the earth splitting open. It was footsteps. When the mist parted, Elias saw it. The house stood in the middle of a meadow, its frame leaning like an old man's shoulders, its shutters rattling against the morning breeze. It was an ordinary house in every sense. Wooden beams, stone foundation, a crooked chimney puffing the faintest thread of smoke. And yet, beneath its frame, where there should have been only roots and earth, Elias saw colossal legs, dark and knotted, like roots twisted into the shape of limbs. They moved slowly, one at a time, pressing deep into the grass. The earth trembled with each step, the meadow bent beneath its weight, flowers shaking loose their petals in waves. The house did not rush. It walked with the patience of centuries. Elias froze. A shiver coursed through him, not of fear, but awe. For all his doubts and disbelief, the stories were true. The house walked. He could not stay hidden forever. The temptation was too great. His feet carried him forward, closer, until he stood at the edge of the meadow. The shadow of the house loomed over him as it drew near, its windows catching the rising sun, glowing like watchful eyes. The house's legs froze mid-stride. The silence pressed down heavier than before. Elias felt the air shift, like the moment before a storm breaks. The door creaked, groaned, and then, impossibly, it opened. A figure stood in the doorway, not quite human, not quite shadow, and in a voice as old as the earth itself, the figure spoke. "You've come at last." Whispers in the moving walls. The next morning, as the first light of dawn broke through a veil of mist, Elias awoke not to the familiar surroundings he had fallen asleep in, but to the distant roar of crashing waves. The air carried the salty temps of the sea, and when he pushed aside the curtains, his breath caught in awe. The house no longer stood in the quiet meadow where he had first found it. Instead, it now rested on a rugged cliff, high above a restless ocean. The endless blue stretched to the horizon, gulls circled in the winds, and below, foaming waves pounded against jagged rocks. Elias stumbled back from the window, heart pounding. The house had moved again, and with each new journey, the mystery only grew deeper. That day, Elias began to notice the house itself was alive in ways he hadn't realized before. The floorboards seemed to hum faintly under his feet, as if a pulse beat within them. The walls carried whispers not loud enough to form words, but soft murmurs that filled the air, like the sound of leaves rustling in a distant forest. At first he thought it might be the wind, but as he pressed his ear against the wall, he heard something clearer, A voice or many voices layered together in a chant he could not understand. The walls were speaking dot, and though the words slipped beyond his comprehension, Elias felt their intent, a call to listen, to follow, to discover. That night, as the sun sank into the ocean and painted the waves gold, Elias explored the hallways. They had changed again. Rooms shifted as if rearranging themselves. Doors appeared where there had been none, and staircases twisted into unfamiliar paths. The house, he realized, was never the same twice. It reshaped itself with every move, as though adapting to the land it chose to rest upon. In the library, he discovered a book lying open on a desk that hadn't been there before. The pages were brittle, the ink faded, but the drawings were unmistakable. Sketches of the very house he was standing in, depicted in deserts, jungles, mountaintops, and even floating on great sheets of ice. The captions beneath the drawings were written in dozens of languages. Some he recognized, many he did not. But one phrase repeated often: "The house that walks, keeper of lost paths." Elias traced the words with his fingertips, shivering at the thought. This wasn't just a wandering home, it was ancient, so old that civilizations had passed down stories of it through generations. And now, somehow, he was part of its story. That evening, the whispers grew louder. As he lay in bed, Elias could feel them pressing at the edges of his thoughts, like a dream trying to break into waking life. Images flashed before his eyes: a desert where the sun bled red into endless dunes, a mountain crowned with thunder, a jungle thick with shadows where eyes gleamed in the dark, and in every vision, the house stood at the center, waiting, watching. Leading. When morning arrived, Elias rushed to the window again. This time, the house stood on the edge of a desert. The ocean was gone, replaced by golden sands stretching into forever. The sun beat down with a fierce glow, and the horizon shimmered with heat. The house had walked once more, and Elias, now braver, realized what he had to do. If the house was leading him across the world, he would follow its story. He would listen to the voices, uncover its secrets, and piece together why it had chosen him. He placed his hand on the wall, and the whispers quieted, as though the house understood. Together, traveler and home set forth on the next leg of their strange, wondrous journey. The desert of endless suns. When Elias awoke, the air was different, dry, heavy, and filled with heat, as if the sun itself had seeped into the walls of the house. He pushed open the shutters, half expecting to see the crashing ocean once more, but instead was blinded by a sea of gold. Stretching out in every direction lay an endless desert. Dunes rolled like frozen waves, their peaks glowing with morning fire. The sky above was an unbroken canvas of blue, and the silence was so complete it seemed louder than any storm. The house had walked again, leaving behind the cliffside ocean, and placing itself in the heart of this blazing wilderness. The first steps into sand. At first Elias hesitated to step outside. The door creaked as he pushed it open, and the hot breath of the desert hit his face. He shielded his eyes and looked out at the vast emptiness. The horizon shimmered like liquid glass, and he felt a tremor of unease. Yet the house seemed to beckon him forward. The whispers in the walls grew faint, as if urging him to step beyond its safety. So Elias did. His boots sank into the warm sand, grain slipping between the seams. He turned to glance back, and froze. The house stood tall and strange, its shadow cast long upon the dunes. But it was different again. The roof stretched higher, like a watchtower. The windows glinted like dark eyes, and on the outer wall, etched into the stone, was a carving he had never seen before: a blazing sun, circled by 7 smaller orgs. It was as though the desert itself had reshaped the house. The travelers of the Elias wandered further, scanning the horizon for signs of life. And soon, he saw it. A thin column of figures, dark against the glowing dunes, moving like a caravan. He rushed forward, waving an arm, and as he neared, the figures resolved into people, desert travelers, wrapped in flowing robes of white and ochre, leading camels burdened with supplies. Their faces were shaded by scarves, but their eyes glimmered with curiosity when they noticed the boy. A tall man at the front of the caravan approached. His voice was deep, carried on the hot wind. "You came from the house," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. Elias nodded, startled. "You know it." The man's eyes narrowed. "Everyone in these sands knows of the walking house. It crosses dunes that no caravan dares to travel. Some call it a curse, others a blessing. Tell me, child, did it open its doors for you?" "Yes," Elias whispered. "It took me in." The man regarded him with awe, then bowed his head. The entire caravan lowered their eyes in respect to Elias, but to the house that loomed behind him, the legend of the 7 suns. That night, the travelers invited Elias to their fire. The desert grew cold, and the stars stretched endlessly above. So clear, it felt like the heavens had bent down close enough to touch. The tall man introduced himself as Idris, a guide of the desert. Over steaming cups of bitter tea, he told Elias the legend of the 7 suns, the very symbol Elias had seen carved upon the wall long ago. Idris said, the desert was not 1 sun, but 7. Each rose in turn, circling the sky, scorching the earth until nothing could live. People prayed for mercy, but the suns did not listen. Then came the house. It walked across the sands, carrying the prayers of the desperate. The walls held their whispers, and when the suns saw their power gathered, they grew fearful. 6 suns dimmed and fell into silence, leaving only 1 to rule the sky. And so the desert was tamed, but the house still walks, carrying the voices of the forgotten, keeping the suns from returning. Elias listened, shivering though the fire burned bright. The whispers in the walls were, they truly the voices of countless souls carried through. Time was the house guarding not just him, but the world itself. The Dune of Echoes. The next day, Idris led Elias to a place few had ever dared to walk. The Dune of Echoes. It was said that voices of the past lived there, trapped by the sands. They climbed, the wind grew strange. Every gust carried faint words, in countless languages, as though the desert itself was speaking. When Elias reached the top and looked down, he gasped that, in the hollow between dunes, stood shadows of people flickering like mirages, rising from the sand, dissolving again. They whispered, they sang, they cried, and in the middle of them, all Elias saw the house. Not the house as it was now, but as it had been centuries ago. Smaller, cruder, carried by wooden stilts that sank into the sands. It was walking through memory, the return by nightfall. Elias returned to the house. Idris and the caravan had bowed their heads once more, refusing to step too close. The house chooses where to go. Idris told him, if it has chosen you, then you carry the voices now. Do not ignore them, boy. They will guide you. Elias stepped inside, the door closing with a heavy sound. The house hummed beneath his hands, stronger now, as though proud of the path he had walked. That night, as Elias lay in bed, he dreamed of suns blazing overhead, of shadows marching across the earth, and of the house standing eternal, carrying its secrets through endless lands. And when dawn came again, the desert was gone. The house had walked once more. The village of forgotten faces. The young traveler awoke to the creak of shifting timbers. The house was walking again. He pressed his palms against the window frame and peered into the gray dawn. Below, the earth rolled like a river of stone, each step of the great wooden legs shaking the world beneath them. Mist clung to the air, wrapping the house in ghostly veils. The traveler's heart raced, not with fear, but with the strange exhilaration he always felt when the house chose its next destination. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the deep thuds of the house's movement. When the house finally slowed and came to rest, the traveler descended the spiral staircase and stepped out into a world that felt hushed, as though it was holding its breath. He found himself in a village unlike any he had seen before. The streets were paved with cobblestones, slick with moss, and the houses were small, hunched things, their wooden beams bent as if they carried heavy secrets. Yet it was not the architecture that unsettled him, it was the people. They moved about their tasks with blank expressions. No laughter, no chatter, not even the quiet murmur of gossip that usually filled village air. Their faces were pale, their eyes dull, as though they had been emptied of memory itself. When one villager passed by the traveler, their gaze slid over him as if he were no more remarkable than a fallen leaf. The traveler tried to speak to a woman carrying a basket of apples. "Good morning," he offered gently, but she only nodded, her lips parting to reveal no words. The silence was so complete it made his ears ache. He felt the pull of the house behind him, like a guardian urging him to return, but curiosity held him fast. He wandered deeper into the village square where a dry fountain stood, its stone carvings worn smooth by time. There, at last, he noticed something strange. Faces, dozens of them, carved into the fountain, each with wide eyes and mouths open as if mid-scream. And then he understood. These villagers had not forgotten their voices. Their voices had been stolen. That night, as the house loomed at the village edge, the traveler could not sleep. The stillness pressed against him like a weight, and he dreamed uneasy dreams. In one, he saw the villagers' shadows moving independent of their bodies, whispering secrets they could no longer speak. When he awoke, the whisper remained, carried in the wind. Determined to help, he followed the sound. Past the fountain, beyond the edge of the village, he found an old oak tree split down the middle by lightning. Its hollow glowed faintly, and inside, woven from roots and tangled vines, he saw a cage. Within it, Dozens of swirling shapes fluttered, like moths of smoke and light. Voices. The stolen voices of the villagers. The traveler reached out, but before his hand could touch the cage, the air thickened. A figure emerged from the mist, cloaked in tattered robes, its face hidden behind a mask carved from bone. Its voice, when it spoke, was not one, but many whispers layered upon whispers. "You should not have come," the figure hissed. The traveler's heart pounded. The house loomed in the distance, silent yet awake, as though it too was listening. He knew now that the house had not brought him here by accident. It had chosen this place, chosen him, and chosen this trial. With trembling resolve, he stood his ground. "I came to return what belongs to them." The figure tilted its masthead, the voices rising into a low, dreadful laugh. The ground beneath the traveler quivered, and from the hollow roots of the oak, shadows began to crawl. The traveler clenched his fists. Somewhere deep inside, beneath his fear, the house's presence surged in him like a heartbeat, and the chapter closed with a single realization pressing heavy in his chest. This was not just a village cursed with silence. This was a village waiting for him. The keeper of voices. The traveler stood before the masked figure, the stolen voices fluttering like trapped fireflies inside the root cage. The silence of the village pressed against his ears, broken only by the chorus that poured from the figures. Throat hundreds of whispers layered, twisting together like a storm of lost words. "Return them," the traveler said, though his voice wavered. The figure tilted its head, bone mask gleaming in the moonlight. "They are mine," it murmured. "The villagers gave them willingly. They were tired of grief, of memory, of love. Words betray, silence obeys." The traveler's heart ached as he thought of the villagers. Hollow faces, their blank eyes staring through him. Could anyone willingly give away their voice, the very thread of their soul? "No," he whispered to himself, then louder. They were deceived. The figure stepped closer, robes dragging. Across the mossy ground, deceived, it hissed, or relieved. "Do you not know what pain lies in speech? Words cut deeper than any blade. The house brought you here, traveler, but it will not save you." The traveler felt the house's presence behind him, its looming frame like a sentinel in the mist, though it did not move. He sensed it listening, waiting, almost as if it had faith in him. He took a deep breath and approached the cage. The voices inside shimmered, their sound like the sigh of wind through reeds. He reached out, but the shadows surged, twisting into clawed shapes that lunged at him. The traveler stumbled back, but then something stirred within him. A warmth, a rhythm. Not his heartbeat, but the echo of the house itself. Each timber of that ancient home carried centuries of memory. It had seen laughter, tears, prayers, arguments, every voice of every soul it had sheltered. And now, it lent its strength to him. The traveler raised his hand again. This time, when the shadows lunged, they recoiled as though striking against an invisible wall of sound. From his lips spilled a single word, not chosen, but given. "Return." The root cage trembled. The voices inside flared like sparks, pressing against their prison. The masked figure shrieked, stumbling back as cracks spread through the cage's vines. "Stop!" it roared, its chorus breaking into chaotic fragments. "You do not understand what you free. Words will curse them again." But the traveler only spoke the word once more, firmer this time. "Return." The cage split apart with a sound like thunder. The voices burst free, swirling upward into the night sky before raining down upon the village. One by one, the villagers gasped, clutching their throats as life returned to their eyes. A child laughed. A woman wept openly. A man shouted a name into the night, his voice shaking with joy. The village was alive again, but the masked figure remained, its shoulders hunched, its chorus broken into ragged gasps. Slowly, it lowered its mask, and beneath it was no face at all, only a hollow void. The traveler stared, chilled to his bones. Without their silence, the figure whispered, its voice fading, "I am nothing." And then, like smoke, it dissolved into the mist, leaving only the hollow oak tree behind. The traveler's knees weakened, but the house's presence steadied him. He turned back to see the villagers gathered in awe around the walking mansion. Their voices filled the night, some in gratitude, some in song, others in simple chatter that now sounded more beautiful than any symphony. The traveler climbed the steps back into the house. The door closed behind him with a soft sigh. The floorboards shifted beneath his feet, as though the house itself was nodding in quiet approval. He realized then that this was no ordinary journey. The house did not walk without reason. It sought out wounds in the world, hidden places where despair had taken root, and it carried him to them, not as a guest, but as a healer. And so the traveler rested, heart heavy yet hopeful, as the house stirred once more, its great wooden legs lifting, setting the world trembling. The journey was far from over. The night that never ended. The house walked for days without pause. Its great beams creaked like the bones of an old titan as it crossed valleys, streams, and wind-swept plains. The traveler no longer wondered where it was leading him. He understood that the house chose the path, guided by something beyond his sight. But as the days passed, the sun began to falter. First, its rise came later. Then its light dimmed, hanging low in the sky, pale and distant as if exhausted. And then on the seventh day it vanished altogether. The world fell into endless night. The traveler pressed his palm to the window. No stars glimmered above, no moon to offer comfort, only darkness thick, oppressive, alive. The air felt colder with each step the house took, and frost laced the glass panes, spreading like white roots. The house walked on. By the second night, though night was all there was, the traveler noticed lanterns flickering on the horizon. Not fire, but a strange pale glow that pulsed like breathing. The house turned toward it. When they arrived, the traveler saw a city frozen in silence. Towers of ice rose from the earth like jagged teeth, their surfaces glowing faintly from within. Streets were deserted, yet the glow of those frozen spires illuminated everything in a ghostly blue. The traveler stepped outside, boots crunching on frost. His breath curled in the air. Every building he passed was carved from ice doors, windows, stairways, yet they seemed lived in. The tables bore cups frozen in mid-motion, as though the people had vanished in the middle of a meal. And then he heard it, faint at first, then growing clearer, a voice. Not one voice, but many. They whispered through the icy streets, weaving around him like threads of wind. He turned, but no one was there. He pressed his hand to a wall of ice and flinched. Inside the frozen tower was a face, a woman, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth open in an eternal scream. The traveler stumbled back, heart hammering. He looked out and then saw more faces, dozens, maybe hundreds, trapped within the ice. Their whispers were the sound he had heard, voices of those imprisoned, muffled yet desperate, calling for release. The house stood behind him, its windows glowing faintly as if urging him on. The traveler clenched his fists. He remembered the silent stealer in the last village. He remembered the cage of roots. And now, an entire city locked in eternal night. At the center of the city, a great spire of ice rose higher than the rest. Its glow was strongest, pulsing like the heartbeat of this frozen nightmare. The traveler knew, without knowing how, that something waited for him there. He approached slowly, every breath sharp in his chest. The closer he drew, the colder the air became, until even his eyelashes frosted white. When he reached the spire's base, he found an opening carved into the ice, a doorway. Inside, the glow was blinding. The walls shimmered with trapped souls, their faces watching him with hollow eyes. He walked deeper until he reached a vast chamber. At its center stood a throne of ice. Upon it sat a figure draped in robes of shadow, its form blurred and shifting as if made of smoke, frozen solid. Its head was crowned with shards of ice that gleamed like daggers. Its voice was a whisper that carried like thunder. Another one who walks with the house. The traveler's heart froze. Who are you? The figure leaned forward, frost spilling from its form. I am the keeper of the long night. Once, I was a king. My people feared death, so they begged me for eternity. I gave it to them. I stilled the sun, and I froze their bodies in beauty that would never fade. Now they live forever within the ice. The traveler's stomach turned as he looked at the frozen faces. They are not living, they are trapped. The keeper's hollow laugh echoed, sharp as breaking glass. Trapped or saved? Mortality is the cruelest curse. Here, they feel no hunger, no pain, no loss. Why do you resist me, traveler? Perhaps you too should rest in my night. Frost crept across the floor toward him, reaching like skeletal hands. The traveler stepped back, his breath ragged. He thought of the house, of its warmth, of the voices he had freed. He thought of the villagers who laughed and wept again, even if those emotions brought both joy and sorrow. And in that moment, he understood it was not silence or stillness that the world needed. It was not eternity. It was the fleeting, fragile, trembling spark of being alive. He closed his eyes and whispered not to the keeper, but to the house itself. Light. The house answered. Its windows blazed behind him, golden and fierce, spilling warmth into the frozen chamber. The ice walls cracked, spider-webbing under the force of that sudden heat. The whispers of the frozen souls grew louder, stronger, until they roared like a storm. The keeper screamed, rising from the throne, its form unraveling into a blizzard of shadow. No, you will undo eternity. The traveler raised his hand as the golden light surged past him. Then let them live again. The chamber shattered, ice exploded into fragments, and with it, the faces melted free. One by one, the people gasped as air filled their lungs, their voices no longer whispers but cries of astonishment. Outside, the frozen towers collapsed, their glow extinguished as the true night sky returned unto with it. A pale dawn breaking at the horizon. The keeper's scream faded into nothingness. The traveler staggered back toward the house as the people of the city stumbled into the thawing streets, bewildered but alive. When he entered, the door shut softly behind him. The house groaned, its beams heavy with weariness, but its windows flickered like tired eyes relieved of a burden. The traveler whispered almost to himself, "You're showing me the wounds of the world, one by one," and the house walked on. The house walked steadily, its wooden beams groaning under a weight that was not physical but ancient, as though every step downward pressed it into a deeper layer of time. The traveler leaned against the window, his eyes wide, adjusting to the glow that spread across the cavern walls. It was not fire, not torchlight, not anything human-made. Instead, the walls themselves shimmered, veins of crystalline stone pulsing with light, like the beating of a heart. The fissure, the storm, had opened, widened, and the house descended into a chamber so vast that its ceiling was lost in shadow. Every step the house took stirred the air, and in that air, faint voices echoed, not sharp, not cruel, but distant and mournful, like forgotten lullabies sung across centuries. The traveler pressed his ear to the wood of the house. He could swear the house was listening to dew. The river of Glastapath led them to an underground river, but this was no ordinary current. The water glowed with a milky brilliance, and its surface rippled as if it reflected not the cavern roof but the stars of another sky. The house stepped carefully into the shallow current, its feet splashing without a sound, as though the river muffled its own noise out of respect. The traveler leaned from the window, entranced. In the glowing water, he saw not only his reflection, but images, faces he did not know, places he had never walked. A woman carrying a lantern across a desert, a child setting candles afloat on a lake, an old man kneeling before a mountain, his eyes closed in prayer. The traveler pulled back quickly, breath catching in his throat. Were these visions the river's memories, or his own dreams reflected back at him? 3. The guardians in stone beyond the river. The cavern opened into a hall of statues. They stood silent, carved from the very rock, their eyes shaped from crystal that glowed faintly in the cavern light. Each statue was different. Some bore crowns, others cloaks, some held weapons, and others simple staffs. They were not arranged randomly. They formed a circle, as though standing in an eternal council. The traveler shivered. Though unmoving, he felt watched, judged. When the house entered the circle, a deep resonance shook the chamber. The statue's crystal eyes brightened, and a sound rose from the walls, the echo of thousands of footsteps. It was as if the cavern itself remembered every being who had ever passed through, every life, every word, every silence. The traveler whispered aloud, though no one was there to answer. Are these the guardians of this place, or are they prisoners of it? The house did not stop, but its timbers creaked as if in reply. Ivy, the ceiling of stars at last. The house emerged into a dome so massive that the traveler gasped. Above him stretched a ceiling of stone that glittered as though filled with stars. But these were not stars in the sky, they were minerals, gems, veins of luminous stone catching the cavern light, forming constellations eerily familiar and yet entirely unknown. The traveler recognized some patterned shapes that resembled Orion, the Great Bear, the hunter with his bow, but interlaced among them were constellations he had never seen before. A house with long legs, a serpent coiling endlessly, a pair of hands holding a spear. A realization struck him. The ceiling was not just decoration, it was a map. The stars above mirrored not only the skies of Earth, but skies of other ages, skies that might have existed long before or long after his time. The house slowed, almost reverent, as though remembering its place within the constellation of things. The chamber of whispers. The dome opened into another passage, narrower, where the walls closed in until the house could barely squeeze through. As it moved, the traveler heard whispers louder than ever, but this time he could make out words. They were not in a language he knew, yet he understood. They spoke of journeys without end, of burdens carried across centuries, of a mountain that had once walked as the house now did. The traveler's heart pounded. Was his house the only one, or were there other homes, other beings of wood, stone, and spirit that wandered the earth unseen? The whispers swirled around him, some gentle, some sorrowful, some filled with warning. A phrase repeated again and again, "Do not wake the sleeper below." The traveler pressed his palms against the wooden floor. The house creaked. It sounds strangely uneasy. Vi. The sleeper below at the end of the passage lay a cavern unlike any before. Here, the floor was smooth as glass, and in its center was a pool of water, so still it reflected everything perfectly, like a flawless mirror. Beneath that water, the traveler saw something, not a reflection, something real, vast, and unmoving. It was a face, a colossal face carved in stone, its eyes closed as though in eternal slumber. Its features were serene, noble, yet its size was terrifying, as though an entire mountain had been shaped into a resting figure. The traveler's breath caught. Could this be the sleeper the whispers warned of? A being who lay beneath the world, neither alive nor dead, waiting to be awakened. The house stopped at the edge of the pool. It bowed slightly, its wooden beams groaning low, almost like a gesture of respect. The traveler whispered, "What are you showing me?" The cavern gave no answer, only silence deeper than silence itself. The weight of silence, hours passed, or perhaps diacid, was impossible to know. The traveler remained at the window, staring at the face beneath the water. His thoughts swirled with questions. Who carved such a being? Was it carved at all? Or was it really an ancient titan, sleeping until called? And if it were to awaken, would the earth survive its rising? The house did not move. It stood still, waiting, as though caught between choices, to pass onward or to remain in reverence. The traveler felt his eyelids grow heavy, and soon, he too drifted into sleep. In his dreams, he saw the sleeper open its eyes, and when it did, the entire cavern filled with light brighter than any sun. The rising path. When the traveler awoke, the house had already moved. It stepped away from the chamber of the sleeper, its legs climbing a staircase of natural stone. The air grew warmer, fresher, no longer heavy with echoes, yet the traveler could not shake the weight of what he had seen. He felt changed, as though carrying a burden not his own. The words of the whispers clung to him, "Do not wake the sleeper below," but he wondered, had his very presence already begun to stir it? The staircase twisted upward, leading toward a faint glow. The house climbed patiently, its body weary yet unbroken, and soon the traveler saw the first hint of daylight. Breaking through cracks above. They were leaving the underworld. The world above changed when the house emerged at last. The traveler gasped. The world above was not the same as when they entered. The sky burned with colors he had never seen: gold, violet, deep crimson-like. The heavens themselves had shifted. The land stretched in unfamiliar shapes, rivers curving differently, mountains standing where none had been. Had they been gone for days or centuries? The house continued forward, its wooden frame steady, its pace unbroken. Yet in every step, the traveler sensed it was carrying more than just itself now. It carried secrets of the caverns below, whispers that lingered like shadows in its beams. The traveler placed his hand on the window frame. "I will not leave you," he murmured. The house groaned in reply, almost like a sigex. The promise of what comes next night fell quickly, as though the sky itself hurried to hide its strange colors. Stars bloomed, but they were not the same constellations as before. They were new, unknown, as though they had stepped into another chapter of the Earth's story. The traveler curled near the window, gazing outward. He felt the house moving, strong and silent, its long legs carrying him into a world unfamiliar yet alive with wonder, though his heart trembled with the weight of the sleeper's warning. Another feeling rose to meet it. "Hope," the traveler whispered to himself just before sleep took him again. "Wherever you walk, I will follow, even if the whole earth changes around us." The house creaked in the night air, carrying him onward into mysteries untold. The garden of forgotten faces. The house had walked across mountains, deserts, rivers, and endless plains. It had seen storms that raged like angry gods and dawns so quiet they felt sacred. But now, its journey brought it to a place unlike any the young traveler had ever imagined. It was a valley so wide that the horizon seemed to bow under its weight. And within that valley bloomed a strange, impossible garden. At first glance, it looked like a paradise. Flowers stretched as far as the eye could see, their petals glowing faintly in hues of silver and pale gold, as though they had drunk the light of forgotten moons. Vines as thick as serpents coiled around ancient statues, and tall trees arched high overhead, their leaves whispering in voices soft and mournful. But as the young traveler leaned out of the house's window, something struck him like a quiet shiver, every flower, every petal, every carved stone bore the faint shape of a face, not painted, not sculpted, but formed as if the garden itself had grown the likeness of countless souls. Some smiled, faint and distant. Others wept. Many seemed trapped in an expression of longing, as if caught in the moment of calling out for someone who never came. The young traveler drew in his breath. "What is this place?" The house gave no answer, but its wooden beams groaned softly, as if warning him to tread carefully. The first walk into the garden when the house finally stopped moving. Its heavy doors swung open by themselves. The young traveler stepped outside, the earth beneath his boots soft and cool, the air tinged with the scent of roses and ashdot everywhere he looked. Faces watched him, not alive, yet not entirely lifeless either. The garden pulsed with memory, a path wound through the flowers, paved not with stone but with shards of broken mirrors. Each shard reflected not his own face, but faces of strangers, men, women, children, elders, none of whom he recognized. They blinked, they turned, they seemed alive within the glass. It was unnerving. It was beautiful. As he walked, he began to hear whispers, faint as the rustle of leaves. "Stay with us, do not forget, do not leave again." The voices drifted from every direction, carried on the wind, spoken by mouths that did not move. The young traveler steadied his breath. "I cannot stay," he said aloud, though his voice trembled. "I am still searching." The garden seemed to sigh, and the petals nearest to him curled inward, as though in grief. The keeper of the garden, at the heart of the valley, where the mirrored path widened into a great circle, stood a fountain unlike any other. Instead of water, it poured light streams of pale silver that cascaded silently, pooling at its base. Within that pool floated countless faces, their features shifting and merging as though made of liquid memory. And beside the fountain sat the keeper. She was cloaked in vines that seemed to grow from her very skin, her hair woven with living flowers that bloomed and withered in an endless cycle. Her eyes were pools of shadow, and yet, within them, the young traveler felt the weight of centuries. "You have come far," the keeper said, her voice carrying the hush of wind moving through long abandoned halls. "And still, the house walks. Do you know where it leads?" The traveler shook his head. "I only follow. I seek to know why it moves, why it chooses me." The keeper rose, her form towering, though she did not seem to move at all. "This is the garden of forgotten faces, all who were touched by the house, those who lived within its wandering halls, those who heard its footsteps in the night are remembered here. When they are gone from the world, the garden keeps them." The traveler's heart quickened. "Then, if I look closely, might I find someone I know?" The keeper tilted her head. "Perhaps, but beware. Some who look upon these faces never find their way out again." The test of memory, the keeper extended her hand, and the mirrored path at the traveler's feet shifted, spreading outward like water. The shards reassembled into one vast mirror, stretching to the horizon, reflecting not the sky but a storm of faces swirling together. "Walk," the keeper commanded. "If the house has chosen you, then you must know your place among its memories." The traveler stepped onto the mirror. It did not shatter. Instead, it rippled beneath his weight, and as he walked, the faces rose. One by one, they emerged like ghosts from the mirror's surface, reaching for him, pleading, calling his name, though he had never seen them before. He quickened his pace, but the voices grew louder. "Stay with us. We remember you. Do not abandon us again." The traveler pressed forward, his hands trembling, his heart pounding. He could not stop. If he stopped, he feared he would sink into the mirror and become one of them. Finally, he reached the fountain of light once more. Gasping for breath, the keeper watched him with a quiet, unreadable expression. "You did not falter. Few pass this trial, most are swallowed by memory." "Why me?" the traveler asked, his voice breaking. "Why does the house carry me across the world? Why must I walk these paths of sorrow?" The keeper's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "Because you are not seeking a place. You are seeking an ending." The revelation of the house, the traveler froze. Her words cut deeper than the wind, deeper than the silence of forgotten nights. "An ending," he whispered. The keeper nodded. "The house that walks does not wander without reason. Each step brings it closer to the place where its journey will cease. And when it stops at last, so too will your own wandering end." The traveler's breath caught. For the first time, he realized he had never asked what would happen when the house no longer moved. He had only followed, entranced by the mystery. Now he felt the weight of inevitability pressing down upon him. The parting gift, the keeper touched the fountain, and from the pool of faces one rose a face the traveler recognized. It was his mother's. Her features were soft, her eyes warm, though she was long gone from the living world. Her lips curved into a smile as gentle as dawn. "My child," her voice echoed, "you have walked far. Do not be afraid. The house carries not only you, but all of us. It remembers, it protects, it waits." Tears welled in the traveler's eyes. He reached out, but the image dissolved into ripples of silver. The keeper lowered her hand. "Now you know, go. The house waits." The departure the traveler returned to the house, his heart heavy yet strangely calm. As he stepped inside, the walls trembled softly, as if the house had been listening all along. Without a sound, it rose once more, its great beams groaning, its foundations pulling free of the earth. The valley of faces receded behind him. The silver garden fading into mist, the young traveler leaned against the window, his tears drying on his cheeks. For the first time, he was not afraid of where the house would take him next. He knew the end was near, and though endings frightened him, he also knew they were the only way stories could live forever. The house walked on. The last journey of the wandering house. The wind carried a strange stillness that night. Unlike the many restless evenings when the house had stirred, lifted, and set off on its impossible voyage, this night felt heavy with meaning, as if the earth itself waited, holding its breath for what would come next. Aaron stood on the balcony of the wandering house, staring into the horizon where twilight met the vast plains. He had grown since that first night when he stumbled upon the house by accident, just a boy drawn to curiosity. Now, after countless travels across deserts, forests, oceans, and mountains, he was no longer just a traveler. He had become part of the house's story, part of its beating heart. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the house seemed weary. Its timbers creaked, not in excitement, but in resignation. Its great stone steps shifted heavily into the earth, as though reluctant to rise again, the whisper of the earth as the stars unveiled themselves above. A whisper moved through the wooden halls of the house. It wasn't the ghostly voices Aaron had once feared, nor the playful laughter he had sometimes heard when the house shifted. This was deeper, more solemn. "It is time." The words echoed not in his ears, but in his chest. He pressed his hand against the wooden railing, feeling the vibration, as though the house itself spoke to him. "Time for what?" he whispered back, uncertain if the house truly heard him. The answer came not in words but in sensation. The ground beneath trembled. Gently, like a sigh, the walls pulsed faintly with warmth, as though the house's spirit were bidding him farewell. Aaron's heart tightened. He understood. The house was nearing the end of its journey, the final pilgrimage at dawn. The house stirred once more, but it did not rise with its usual suddenness. Instead, it groaned, gathering strength, every movement deliberate. Slowly, like an old giant waking from slumber, the house lifted itself upon its impossible legs and began to walk. Aaron did not resist. He packed no belongings. He only carried the small journal he had written in since his first night, filled with drawings, maps, and notes of every strange land the house had shown him. The journey was slower than before, as if the house cherished every step. Villages they passed no longer panicked at the sight of a moving house. Many had seen it before, whispered of its legends, and now they came out to watch with reverence. Children pointed, elders bowed, and travelers left offerings of fruit, coins, or handmade trinkets in its path. The house accepted silently. Walking onward, the mountains called. Days passed. The landscapes grew unfamiliar. They crossed endless valleys and rivers, entered forests that seemed untouched by human hands. And then, one evening, Aaron saw it, a mountain unlike any he had seen before. Its peak was hidden among the clouds, its base wide and powerful, as though it had stood since the birth of the world. The house slowed. Aaron felt it in his bones. This was the destination. The house approached the mountain and stopped at its base. For the first time, it did not take another step. Its legs folded, and with a great sigh, it settled into the earth. The ground shook, gently, not in violence, but in welcome. Arin placed his palm on the wall beside him. The wood was warm, alive, but fading. "Are you staying here?" he asked softly. A shiver passed through the timbers, almost like a nod. The gift of memory that night, Aaron dreamed, but this dream was unlike the others. He saw the house's history, its creation long ago, by hands both human and divine. It had once been an ordinary home, filled with laughter and life. But when its people were lost to war and famine, the house had wept. It longed to protect, to shelter, to keep moving so it would never lose anyone again. And so, the earth itself granted it legs, spirit, and memory. For centuries it had wandered, carrying souls across lands, teaching lessons, granting shelter, and searching endlessly for rest. Now, after lifetimes of wandering, it had found peace. The mountain would be its resting place. When Aaron woke, he knew what he must do. Aaron's choice the next morning, the house's doors opened wide, inviting him out. The air smelled of pine and ancient stone. Birds circled the mountain's peak, their cries echoing in the silence. Aaron stepped outside, his heart heavy. He turned back to the house, its windows glowing faintly, like tired eyes watching him. "Thank you," Aaron whispered, "for everything, for showing me the world, for teaching me to listen." The house groaned softly, almost like a reply. Then, its glow dimmed, settling into stillness. Its legs folded completely, disappearing into the earth. Slowly, impossibly, the soil and roots began to climb its walls, wrapping it in green and stone. Within moments, the house was no longer a house, but part of the mountain itself, its final home. Aaron fell to his knees, tears running down his face, but he was not grieving. He felt peace. The house had given him more than he could ever repay. The wanderer continued. Aaron stayed by the mountain for many days. He carved a stone marker at its base, inscribing, "Here rests the house that walked." Across the earth, may its journeys live forever in the hearts of those it touched. But deep within, he knew this was not the end. The house had given him its stories, its lessons, and its strength. The journey was now his to continue. He gathered his journal, strapped it to his back, and began to walk. His legs felt unsteady at first, but with every step, he felt the rhythm of the wandering house within him. And though he was only one traveler, the world seemed to lean closer, listening as though the house's spirit still walked beside him. Legend lives on years later. Stories spread across villages, cities, and kingdoms. Some spoke of a boy who walked with the patience of mountains and the strength of rivers. Others swore they saw him accompanied by a shadow of a house, appearing only in moonlight, walking just behind him. The legend of the wandering house did not die. It lived on, through Aaron, through the people who had once glimpsed its towering frame, and through the whispers of the earth itself. And on nights when the wind was soft and the stars glowed brightly, some claimed they could hear its gentle creak of timbers, the slow steps of something vast and kind, moving across the earth, not gone, just resting forever, watching.